1983.
That's what I saw in 1983.
Mhm. Right, good afternoon and welcome to the Clayton County Library System Virtual Graphic Novel Club. My name is Erica.
And I'm rolling.
And today we are talking about the Mighty Thor, Marvel's Thor. Yes, so we're gonna jump in because he is a major Marvel character and we got a lot to talk about. All right. Thor was created by Stan Lee and artist Jack Kirby. The character was created using the Germanic gods of the same name, first appeared in Journey in the Mystery number 83 in August of 1962. The Silver Age of comics was during this time, and it was looking towards the future. So you had a lot of comics around this time looking to get into sci-fi, a little bit of fantasy, and Thor fit both of those. Marvel already had a hit in Fantastic Four and was trying to continue to create characters. Unfortunately, Lee nor Kirby stuck around to resume Thor's story. So the one you see here in 1962, there was also, his story also came up in the golden age of Marvel. And at that time, they were not called Marvel Comics, they were called something else. Timeless comic. I think it was Time. But yes, and that the golden age is Venus number 11, and you're talking about. It's not the exact same Thor that we're used to. It's just a name. We covered this also in Loki, how he came up in the 1950s in golden age, but he was a completely different looking character later on in the 60s. And so neither one of these guys stuck around to resume Thor's story after Journey into the Mystery, but Lee's brother, Larry Liver, scripted much of the early material, and after several issues, Kirby moved on to X-Men and Avengers titles, but not before contributing to Thor's supporting cast. So Kirby created a whole supporting cast that we will talk about today. Readers were introduced to Thor, who was called Dr. Donald Blake. When this story in Journey into Mystery, he's vacationing in Norway, and while Dr. Black encounters an invading alien force called the Stone Men of Saturn, they are later called Chronons, and I'm guessing they are a villain later on in Marvel. Yeah, so, but they were first called the Stone Men of Saturn. He runs and takes cover in a cave and finds a cane, which he strikes against the wall. The cane is the enchanted hammer. Help me out. Mjolnir. Mjolnir. Now, Mjolnir is Thor's hammer, that hammer that's right there in his picture. And it is basically its own character too. But Dr. Blake transforms into the mighty Thor. The inscription on the hammer declares, whoever holds this hammer is worthy shall possess the power of Thor. As Thor, Blake could fly, he could control the elements, and he possessed extraordinary strength. Mjolnir magically returns after being thrown, but if it's out of Thor's grasp for more than 1 minute, Thor reverts back to his civilian identity of Blake. So when Dr. Blake returned to New York to set up his practice, he hired a nurse named Jane Foster, and she and Blake began a romance. Now we'll get into that later also because they have a long and storied history throughout the Marvel universe. But she had no idea of the alter ego of Thor. So it's kind of like Superman, Clark Kent with the glasses, and then Superman without the glasses. But Thor looks like a completely different person than Blake. And so he also could not reveal his alter ego to anyone. Odin is Thor's father, and he strictly forbade it. Odin is the ruler of the Norse gods in the distant realm of Asgard, which is where Thor is from. Lee and Kirby returned in late 1963 to change the strip's focus from earthbound crime fighting to the more expansive and imaginative realm of Asgard. So they did like a total 180, and that's where that fantasy sort of, where it's not really space, it's kind of like Middle Earth.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like Middle Earth yeah. So it's another dimension, which is Asgard. So this is kind of heaven-ish.
It's outer space, interdimensional.
Yeah.
That's how they get away with it.
Yeah. It's weird, guys. All right.
Because heaven is the 10th realm. They talk about
Yes.
the 9 realms.
Yeah,
Heaven is actually the 10th realm, but Odin separated them because of a war that they had.
that's true. That's true. We will get into that later too. And so the creative team introduced a new series called Tales of Asgard, which adapted the Norse legends and integrated them into the lead strip's growing band of Asgardians. Among the most important new characters were Thor's companions, Volstagg, Fandral, and Hogan. Oh, I remember them all from the movie now. And the supporting characters also included Heimdall, the guardian of the Rainbow Bridge to Asgard, and Siff, a shield maiden who was one of Asgard's most skilled fighters. The Asgardians antagonists also introduced in this period were the sorceress Cornelia, Amora, the enchantress, and the axe-wielding Scourge, the executioner. In 1966, Journey into the Mystery was retitled Thor. The more characters and more villains were introduced also during this time. Some of the characters introduced was the Greek god Hercules, his father Zeus, and the ruler of the netherworld, Pluto. Later stories featured grotesque rock troll Hela, who was the goddess of death, and the fire demon Surtur, all of whom conspired against Asgard. Also around this time, the backstory of Dr. Blake and Thor was clarified. Because remember, he has an alter ego that is out there. And so Odin had punished Thor by transforming him into a mortal, hence Blake. Blake was found the cane and he changed back to his true self, the mighty Thor. The creators also used Blake's identity less and less, and by 1970, it had been largely abandoned. It's just a little side note here. 1970 is also the time that Jack Kirby left Marvel over creative differences. He was one of the creators of many of those characters in the 60s. Fantastic Four, X-Men, Thor. Didn't he do Black Panther too? Mm-hmm. I know Stan Lee did, but okay. But yeah, those were some of the characters he had created for Marvel, and they got into it and he left. And so he went to DC to create the New Gods, Mr. Miracle, and the Forever People. And just a little another side note, in 2 weeks, we'll be talking about the New Gods. So we'll get some more Kirby. A year later, Stan Lee also left Marvel. So you got your top 2 creative guys leaving Marvel at the same time around 1970, 1971. So Jerry Conway and Lin Nguyen, the artist John Buscema, and carried on the same traditions as Jack Kirby and Lee. Throughout the 1970s, though, Thor did not stray far from his beginnings, and that was established in the Silver Age. So Buscema remained the principal artist during this time, and combining his peerless draftsmanship with a strong sense of action. So you still get a lot of what you saw in the 60s.
So step forward into 1983, and Walt Simonson, 1983 to 1987, took over as writer. Simonson upended the established order by having Thor suffer defeat at the hands of a bizarre-looking alien called Beta Ray Bill. In a stunning twist, Bill is deemed worthy of Mjolnir and inherits the power of Thor. Bill soon returned Mjolnir to Thor, and Odin enlists the dwarves of Nagalia to create the enchanted hammer Stormbringer for Bill. Now, if you remember from in the Thor movies, remember he loses his hammer, Hela destroys his hammer, and he goes to the trolls to get a new weapon forged, and they give him this hammer / axe. That's actually Stormbringer.
Okay.
So Simonson carried Thor from outer space to a pond in Central Park, where, having been turned into a frog by the machinations of Loki, Thor leads an army of amphibians in a war against encroaching rats. He told tales of Thor with the odds against him and with the universe at stake. Most notable among these is the tale of Scourge, Thor's longtime foe who stood alone at Ylargru in Thor number 362, bravely sacrificing himself to turn back the hordes of hell. Now, if you don't remember, that's another scene from the where he goes up against his sister in the movies. Okay, so the guy who wields the machine gun, that's Scourge the Executioner. So they kind of kept his story similar. It was similar to the comic story because in the end, he actually becomes a hero to Asgard. Now, what they left out is that he had been, before he went against Hel, he had been mind controlled by the Enchantress. Okay. And so we'll talk about that a little later. All right. So in the 1990s, Tom DeFalco and Ron Friends took Simonson's place. They combined Thor's essence with a new human host, an architect named Eric Masterson, to create what was effectively a new Thor. The old Thor reappeared, and the Masterson incarnation, now known as Thunderstrike, spun off into his short-lived series from 1993 to 1995. Thunderstrike also teamed up with Beta Ray Bill and a Thor of the future called Dargo in Thor Corps. After issue number 502, as part of a company-wide late 1990s restructuring plan known as Heroes Reborn, the Thor comic was rebranded as Journey into Mystery. In the wake of Heroes Reborn, Thor was split apart from his human host by Hogan, who feared that his son had become too attached to Midgard, which is the Asgardian's name for Earth. Odin then died, and his almost limitless power was transferred to his son, who became Thor, Lord of Asgard. After that, Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, destroyed Asgard and seemingly wiped out the Asgardians. When Thor entered a limbo-like void, his alternate Don Blake identity reappeared on Earth. Finding Mjolnir, Blake used it to enter the void and reunite with Thor. Thor returned to Earth and used the Odin power to recreate Asgard as a city floating over the town of Broxton, Oklahoma. The culmination of the Dark Reign event saw Norman Osborn, alter ego of the Spider-Man villain Green Goblin, who had risen to power in the US government, launch an attack on the new Asgard and destroy it. Thor and his Avengers allies defeated Osborn and his forces. Marvel launched a new Mighty Thor comic series written by Matt Fraction and drawn by Oliver Cople in 2011. In 2012, Thor faced a crisis of confidence unlike any in his comic history. Confronted with the idea that mortals would be better off without gods, Thor deems himself unworthy and can no longer wield Mjolnir. The mantle passes to Thor's longtime ally and love interest, Jane Foster, with the text on Mjolnir changing to read, "Whosoever holds this hammer, if she is worthy, shall possess the power of Thor." The unworthy Thor, now calling himself Odin's son, embarks on a quest to redeem himself. At the same time, Foster confronts threats to Midgard and Asgard while also fighting breast cancer, which was ravaging her mortal body. Overcoming resistance from the Asgardian Old Guard led by Odin, Foster solidifies her claim to the mantle of Thor. Every time she transforms into her Asgardian aspect, however, she effectively undoes the cancer treatments that her mortal body has received. Armed with the knowledge that taking up Mjolnir will lead to her death, Foster nevertheless enters combat with a god-killing beast called Mangard. She defeats Mangard, but Mjolnir is destroyed, causing Foster to revert to her mortal form and succumb to cancer. However, she is promptly revived through Odin and Odin's son's combined efforts, and she hands a fragment of the shattered Mjolnir to Odin's son, telling him that there must always be a Thor. Now, we're going to jump into the allies of Thor, and we'll start with the young lady that we just mentioned.
Yes. Oh, did you want to cover these?
Well, you know what? Let's do this. Let's go on and jump into these major story arcs instead. I forgot we put this instead of at the end.
Okay.
A couple of things, we just talked real quick because basically these are gonna fall in line with the characters that we talk about today.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the first big saga that he was a part of, which was the Terminal Saga, which basically is the movie and everything. It just hasn't.
That's when Kirby came back.
Well, but it hadn't brought everybody, like, as far as the movie is concerned, it hadn't brought everybody in the MCU together yet. Just yet. But Thor was a part of that storyline big time. The Ballad of Beta Ray Bill, of course, we spoke about that earlier. As far as an alien being getting the power of Thor because he was deemed worthy. The Surtur Saga, which is an Asgardian saga, because Surtur is he's a fire demon from one of the 9 realms. And so I'm trying to think which movie, was it Ragnarok where they were trying to transport the skull? So that's Surtur there. Yeah. We have Scourge's Last Stand, which occurred in Thor number 362, and this is where he takes on the forces of Hell, which we also see in Thor Ragnarok. Now, one of the newer story arcs that is real big time that happened within the last 20 years would be the God Bone, which is the introduction of Borg, the God Butcher, whom we are slated to actually see
Love and Thunder.
In Love and Thunder, played by the boy who played Batman.
Yeah, Christian Bale.
Yeah.
I saw that the other day and got a little bit more excited about Love and Thunder.
So these are 5 of the major Thor story arcs that have happened over the years that actually build to what's going on now.
Excellent. All right. So jumping into Allies, we did just talk about her. She is a main focus throughout Thor's existence since his beginning, and that is Jane Foster. Now, her first appearance is as Jane Foster, Nurse Jane, in Journey into the Mystery, number 84 in July 1962. Then you have her as Thor, God and Thunder, number 25 in September 2014. And then as Valkyrie in War of the Realms, Omega number 1 in July 2019. That is her latest endeavor in the Thor world. So Dr. Jane Foster actually began as Nurse Jane Foster in 1962, the love interest of Dr. Donald Blake, AKA Thor. In the beginning, Thor would only appear when Dr. Blake was holding Mjolnir. Oh, that is, yes, I love Marvel and how they just take something.
No, it's Nordic.
I know, but at the same time, most of their stuff that they do, especially when Kirby makes up stuff and these names, and I'll be like,
you know what? I don't think half of the stuff that they use for the Thor and Asgard, I don't think that a lot of that stuff is made up.
No, not for. Yeah, you can look it up.
The weird names and everything.
Yeah.
And they're only weird to us because we like using what vowels.
Yeah. Those are so essential to the English language. Yes. So Nurse Foster gushed over Thor, but took a care role towards Dr. Blake due to his fragility. Dr. Blake had to have the cane. He was kind of a frail guy. I think they called him crippled. Yeah, that is not what we call them today. We're not being offensive, but that's what he was called in the comic. This annoyed Blake though, because he was still in love with her and she didn't know that he was Thor. They were the same people. So for some time, after some time though, Blake and Foster fell in love. Afterward, Blake decided to reveal his dual identity to Foster, but his father, Odin, the monarch of Asgard, appeared to him and forbade him to reveal his secret to any mortal. Even though Odin tried for a long time to squash the romance between the two, and he ordered her life to be saved when she lay dying after an explosion caused by a battle between Thor and Mr. Hyde and Cobra. Foster truly loved Blake, and one day she angrily told him that she would not wait forever for him to declare his love for her. They had a really, slow burn romance, is what we would call it today. But Blake did want to marry her, and Blake wanted to marry her. So he had to go to Odin again, but he forbade the marriage because she was mortal and not a goddess. Thor later asked Odin again to reconsider the issue, and Odin relented, saying that Thor could marry her if she proved herself worthy. Jane left America to work in Wundagore Mountain for a man who ended up being the High Evolutionary. Now, we have talked about the High Evolutionary in Loki, am I correct? He was one of Loki's enemies.
Yeah, they go back
and forth. Yeah. So Thor followed, and he asked Odin again to marry Jane, but but Odin wanted Jane to prove herself, so she was brought to Asgard. Now, this story reminded me a lot of Thor #2, Thor the movie, the MCU movie, and I'm guessing that's where they got it from. But she was given superhuman powers by Odin. And Odin must have expected this, but Foster was confused and bewildered by her new abilities and Asgard itself. Declaring that Foster had failed his test, Odin turned her back into a mortal, sent her back to Earth, and removed her memories of the experience with Thor. Odin sent Foster to work for a physician named Dr. Kenneth Kincaid, and the two soon fell in love with each other. This event allowed Odin to manipulate the situation and bring Siff and Thor back together, because Siff, during that time when they were only focused on Asgard stories, Siff was his love interest in those stories. And we'll talk about her in a minute. The romance between Jane and Thor was on and off again for years. I think she ended up marrying Dr. Kincaid, and they have a child together. Jane would eventually marry, but they would divorce later, and she would lose custody of that child because of her love for Thor. Fast forward again into the 2000s, and later, this Jane is now Dr. Jane Foster at this point. I don't know why they did that, but I guess, it just sounded better. Yeah, Nurse Jane didn't sound, nothing wrong with Nurse Jane. Nurses are great. But Dr. Jane Foster, she's at this point diagnosed with breast cancer. Her and Thor are not together at this point, but there's still a love there. They still can't marry. Odin still forbids it. This is 40 years later. Okay. While Thor was away fighting Gore, the God Butcher, Jane received her diagnosis. She later accepted Thor's invitation to represent Midgard Earth in the Congress of Worlds on Asgard while undergoing therapy, but refused magical treatments. During the battle against Nick Fury, Thor lost his ability to wield his hammer, Mjolnir. It's the J. Yeah. The hammer remained unattended on the moon, from where it telepathically sought Jane out. Jane eventually gave into the hammer's call and requested Heimdall to take her to the hammer's location. He's the guy with the rainbow, played by, what's his name? Yes, Idris. And so once she picked up Mjolnir, gaining Thor's powers, transforming and improving her physique. That's her on the left there. She looks quite different from what she looks like as Jane. She would watch Thor as he used his hammer, so she slowly learned how to use Mjolnir by example. Thor would later return and find Jane and demand his hammer back. Thor ultimately accepted that the hammer had a new owner and gave Jane his blessing while not knowing her identity, because he did not know who she was, because it transformed her. He also gave Jane his name too, subsequently going by Odinson only. During this time, no one knew her identity as Dr. Jane Foster, not even Thor, and Sam Wilson, who AKA is the Falcon, is the one who found out her identity when she dropped Mjolnir and during battle and was transformed. He would later visit her in the hospitals as she went underwent cancer treatments as Foster. But he never told anybody her secret either. Unfortunately for Jane, all the progress from the chemotherapy became lost whenever she used Mjolnir, to transform into Thor, and the magical transformation purged all the toxins from Jane's body. It did so with the chemotherapy drugs, but left the cancer behind since it was part of her body. Now that's cool. You get rid of the drugs because you're like, that doesn't belong. But unfortunately, so every time she would become Thor, she would lose the drugs in her system, which progressed her cancer along. And it basically metastasized and reached stage 4. And Dr. Strange told her during one of their, like, I guess, sit downs, she was part of one of the teams, that if she became Thor one more time, she would lose her life. So he and several friends convinced Jane to give up Thor for her health, and Jane learned that the city of Asgard, but then Jane learned the city of Asgard was flying towards the sun due to the actions of Midgard. We're gonna talk about him, right?
No,
We're not.
He's not. He's not a major. He was in one of. He was just the antagonist in one of the storylines, but he's not one of those major characters that. But he's a powerful character.
He's powerful. Yeah.
Powerful.
Yeah.
But he's not one that lasts years.
Yeah. He's one. Yeah. Yeah. He's one of her nemesis.
Right.
She defeated. So she decides to go change into Thor one more time to save Asgard, even if it killed her. And she confronts Midgard. She defeats him by hurling him and Mjolnir into the sun. She gave Odin's son one final kiss before transforming back into her human form and dying. Odin's son then fled with Jane because, again, didn't know that was Jane. So he fled with Jane's lifeless body from Asgard before it exploded and landed on the moon, where he and his fellow Asgardians had evacuated. Refusing to accept Jane's death, Odinson channeled the god Tempest and contained within the now destroyed Mjolnir, and then tried to use that power to bring Jane back to life. At the same time, Jane's soul, because your soul goes elsewhere, stood at the gates of Valhalla. Having come to accept that Jane was one of their own due to her sacrifice, Odin joined his son's efforts, and together they revived her. Without Mjolnir's power to transform her, Jane focused her undivided attention from this point on to chemotherapy. And she convinced Odinson to reclaim his name of Thor and continue to fight the War of the Realms on her behalf. After this, Jane gets better, and she's given the opportunity to defend Earth and fight alongside the Asgardians. Malekith and the Dark Council launched a worldwide invasion of Earth, and Jane and Thor team up again to battle after Odin and Frigga, Queen Frigga, which is Odin's wife, died when the Black Bifrost was destroyed. Jane joined Thor and his past future counterparts in a mission to rescue Odin and Frigga from Malekith at Stonehenge. But Malekith was eventually defeated when Thor used the reforged Mjolnir to strike the villain down. With her, Mjolnir was capable of only taking one more blow. Jane used it to knock one of the eyes out of King Luffy. Now, who is King Luffy yet again? We talked about him before.
King Luffy is the king of the ice cream.
And it's indeed Loki.
Loki's real father.
Yes, Loki's real father. So when the hammer is returned to her, it falls apart, but it recombines. I don't have a picture of it, but it recombines into a band brace that covers her left arm. And when she looks over at the bodies of the fallen Valkyries in the morgue, Thor comes to retrieve the corpses while lamenting that there's no way for the fallen to go to Valhalla with the Valkyries dead. So reacting to the fan brace on Jane's arm, the spirit of Brunhilde and the other Valkyries appear. Brunhilde asks Jane, will she become Valkyrie? And Jane agrees it is then transformed into Valkyrie, which can now transport the dead to Valhalla. And that is Dr. Jane Foster, who is now currently Valkyrie.
which there's actually, don't get her twisted with the character Valkyrie. She
Yes.
has become a
She's
Valkyrie.
become a Valkyrie.
She has
not-
become a Valkyrie,
no.
but because they don't go by their individual names,
No.
they're just known as the Valkyrie. So you have the Valkyrie, who is a basically
She's the last. She wasn't.
well, she was the last Valkyrie.
Mhm.
You know, matter of fact, it is Brunhilde.
Mhm.
She was the last Valkyrie that got away after Hela slain most of the Valkyries during the war between the Asgard.
Gotcha.
So yeah, that's I want to say it's more of a title, but the comics use it.
Yeah, it's an interchanging name. Yeah, like.
All right, so next up we have Lady Siff and the Warriors 3. Now, all of these, the reason why we're going to combine these, they actually have their own story arcs and everything, but all four of these individuals are actually friends of Thor's from his youth.
Mhm.
We'll start with Lady Siff, whose first appearance was Journey into Mystery number 102, January 1964. Basically, when Siff was a child, she possessed long golden hair and often played with young Thor and Loki. Siff and Thor fell in love while they were quite young, but she was kidnapped by the storm giants and made a prisoner of Hela. It was here that Thor offered his own life to ensure her release. Hela, impressed by his nobility, released both of them. Later, his brother, the jealous Loki, cut off all of Siff's golden hair while she was asleep.
Now, I'm going to just ask you a question here because we all know that Hela is Loki's daughter.
Well,
That's later on story. That's
they
later on.
changed. I think they changed it for the movie because
No, they made her his sister in the movie.
his sister.
But I'm saying, like, even in the comics.
Even in the comics,
That's his daughter.
and in lore,
Yes.
Hela is the daughter of Loki and Angrboda.
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And actually, Loki and Angrboda have 2 more kids.
Yes. The wolf.
With who they show in the movie. Well, they show one in the movie and one we're going to speak of. The Fenris Wolf.
Yes. The wolf.
Is basically is it the Fenris Wolf?
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, the
The
wolf.
the big black wolf.
Yeah, the big black wolf from the movie is actually Loki's child as well.
Mhm.
So which
And then
would
there's
make
a
that Hela's brother.
Yep. And then there's that huge Leviathan in the
Well,
ocean.
and that's what we're going to talk about in a minute. Basically, Thor guessed that Loki had something to do with Sif's loss of hair,
Mhm.
so he angrily demanded that Loki restore her golden locks. The scared Loki contacted 2 dwarfish craftsmen, Brock and Idri, who would later create Thor's hammer of Mjolnir. So this all takes place before Thor is granted his weapon. And he asked them to create new hair for Sif. Now, Loki was either unable or unwilling to pay the dwarfs enough gold to create golden hair. So the dwarfs decided that for the price of naught, they would make strands of naught. The dwarfs created magical strands of hair from the blackness of the night. The strands of darkness took root the moment they were placed on Sif's head and then began to grow out. Thor found that Sif's new black tresses made her even more attractive, therefore disrupting Loki's plan to ruin their relationship.
I love how this
Right.
all revolves around the fact that she's attracted to Thor.
Right.
Oh, I love early
Sure.
comics.
Now, for a time, Thor and Sif had a falling out. And many years later, Thor began his career as a superhero on Earth and had a long-time love affair with the mortal Jane Foster. After this, however, Odin arranged for Thor to meet the now adult warrior goddess Sif. They became close companions and fell in love again, and they promised to someday marry each other. Unfortunately, Thor's feelings of responsibility to the Earth and its people often came between the 2 lovers. So in the past, Sif tried to adjust to living on the mundane Earth, but unfortunately, she preferred the majesty of Asgard.
Of course, who wouldn't?
Right. All right, and now we get into the Warriors 3.
The Warriors 3, Fandral, Hogan, and Volstagg, are a member of Asgardian warriors and close allies of Thor ever since his youth. They first met when they joined Thor's expedition to restore the Odin sword that had become cracked. You had, let's use their original names. Fandral.
The Dashing.
No,
Oh.
that was not his original name.
Oh my goodness.
He became Fandral the Dashing, but I want to say he was more like Fandral the Plain.
Oh.
Yeah, Fandral the Quite Plain. Yes. Okay. So, who has been described as one of the most good-looking Asgardians. So, along with his charm and his reputation as a ladies' man, he is also known for his skills in swordsmanship and bravery. Now, Hogan the Good, who later became Hogan the Grim, was a very quiet man, combined, however, with a flaring temper. Now, unlike most Asgardians, he was not Aesir, but stemmed from a land that was conquered long ago by Mogul of the Mystic Mountain. And he ended up being aligned with the Asgardians, basically out of the fact that he was a orphan, because his father and brothers had all perished while seeking the Mystic Mountain for revenge against Mogul in the past. Volstagg is, he ends up being called, he is Volstagg the Perfect.
No, he's
Yes.
voluminous.
But now he's voluminous. Yes. Volstagg was fairly advanced in age, and we'll start with Volstagg and just run the gamut, because this will tell you how they all kind of came together. So Volstagg was fairly advanced in age for an Asgardian, and it had been alluded to that he was a highly respected and feared warrior in his prime. So before his adventures with Thor, he allegedly was named Volstagg the Staggeringly Perfect. All right. He led the youth Hogan the Good and Fandral the Quite Plain, Thor and Loki in hell, fighting against all of its hordes for 40 days and nights. Eventually, Hogan was hurt and forced to retreat. Loki refused to follow them. Volstagg at the time was stabbed, and Thor had to defeat the horde by himself while Loki cared for the fallen warrior. After this battle, in 80 days without food, Volstagg started eating as soon as he could and has never stopped since. Now, this battle was allegedly the one that made Thor basically worthy of Mjolnir. Due to the battle, Hogan the Good became Hogan the Grim, like we said before, and Fandral the Quite Plain became Fandral the Dashing. Volstagg became a huge bumbling oaf, much given to boasting and bragging. Basically, the last in the battle and the first to claim victory, usually undeserved. And referring to himself as the Lion of Asgard, he usually caused more problems than he solved and seemed totally unaware of the chaos that almost followed in his wake. So basically, he didn't used to be, but now that he's been eating all this time and he's Volstagg the Voluminous, yes, he's a bumbling idiot. While you have Hogan, who basically in the comics and in the movie is basically a quiet, silent killer type, and then you have the other one who is boisterous and I guess pretty boy.
He's always looking for the ladies.
Right. Now, when Asgard was destroyed by the first Ragnarok, the Warriors 3 disappeared as well. However, they were rediscovered by Thor later in the bodies of 3 refugee camp guards in Africa. And so he set them free to lead himself to end Africa.
It's magic, I tell you.
And so that's Lady Siff and the Warriors 3. And next up, we have Baldur the Brave, who is Thor's half brother.
Oh.
Another brother. And this is blood half brother.
Okay, well, let's go. So his first appearance was in Journey of the Mystery number 85 in August 1962. Due to prophecies that Baldur's death would help trigger the coming of Ragnarok, the destruction of Asgard and its inhabitants, Odin, the ruler of Asgard, commanded his wife Frigga to make Baldur invulnerable to harm. But before he allowed her to cast the spells, however, he accused Baldur of treason. He accused Baldur of treason because during a battle with the storm giants, He had deserted the fight to put a bird who had fallen from its nest back with its mother. Odin ordered his brother Tyr and Hogan to shoot arrows and throw lances at Balder. But an eagle and a plant stopped the projectiles. Seeing that Balder did not flinch, Odin was content that Balder was the bravest in all of Asgard and decided to grant him the invulnerability. I feel like Odin goes around and gives these impossible.
Well, he's like Zeus.
Yeah, just, I mean, again,
He's
yes,
fickle.
wasteful little
Fickle and
games.
petty,
Exactly.
like they say to God, so.
Like, exactly, just, and Hela was right to do what she did. I stand by that in Ragnarok. Frigga cast spells that will protect Balder from harm of any living and inanimate thing while he was in the Asgardian dimension. However, Balder remained vulnerable to mistletoe. Loki, the god of mischief, learned of the prophecy and the vulnerability and tricked the blind god Hoder into firing an arrow tipped with mistletoe wood at Balder. His hair had turned white as a result of this experience in hell, and later Balder's beloved Nanna sacrificed herself to save Balder from entrapment in marriage to Carnelia. And Balder was so distraught that he resolved to never speak of this incident and or of her again. These death experiences led Balder to forswear the life of a warrior and try to forget his misery through eating. Growing considerably fat, he rode to the desert to die, but encountered Norns, the three goddesses who oversaw the workings of destiny. The Norns gave Balder a vision that restored his faith, and he rode back to Asgard, eventually losing his excessive weight as he became a warrior again. Balder fought in many Asgardian subsequent battles, including one against the demon Surtur, and in which he needed to seek out the aid of the sorceress, Carnelia. When Odin had departed Asgard, Balder became the ruler of Asgard. Balder was though killed in the final Ragnarok by the army wielding mistletoe-tipped spears. And that is Balder the Brave, who is Thor's brother.
I had this full issue with the series.
You do?
Yes, I do.
All right.
All right, so now we get to Captain America. We've spoken on him before many times. First appearance, Captain America, Comics #1, December 1940. Now, Captain Steve Rogers, aka Captain America, the first Avenger, was rejected by the U.S. Army during World War II due to numerous health problems. He ultimately volunteered for Project Rebirth, where he received the super soldier serum developed by Dr. Abraham Erskine. Rogers and others helped the Allies win the war, but not before he was lost at sea and frozen in ice in the form of suspended animation for decades. He was thawed out in the modern age to continue the battle alongside his new allies, the Avengers. Cap is loyal to no politician or government and instead upholds the timeless principles of freedom, equality, and justice of the American dream. Thor and Captain America were teammates in the Avengers. Captain America is one of the few heroes that can wield Thor's hammer, Mjolnir. His first time lifting it was in the Mighty Thor issue number 390. In this issue, Captain America is super patriot US agent and throws Mjolnir at Thor after it is knocked out of his hand. Cap fights off soldiers with Mjolnir defeating them. And that is Captain America.
Yes, and there are some other stories. I know we didn't mention them all. There are some others, but they are like either what if stories or
They're not named Earth 616.
yeah, they're not 616 continuity. This is the only 616 continuity story. So that. Next on the list is another teammate from the Mighty Avengers is Iron Man. His first appearance is in Tales of Suspense, number 39 in December 1962. They were just cranking them out between 60 and 62, like Fantastic Four, Iron Man, Hulk,
But they
Thor.
They didn't have to create any
Spider-Man.
characters, like mainline characters, until like the 2000s, so because of that.
Yeah.
I mean, they tried their hand at it once in the 90s.
I mean, they had their whole rebirth.
You got people like Long Shot and stuff like that that kind of joined the universe.
Yeah. Well, Here it is. Tony Stark is the wealthy son of industrialist and weapons manufacturer Howard Stark, who was also a shield scientist. Stark and his wife Maria. He grew up a genius with a brilliant mind for technology and inventions, and naturally followed in his father's footsteps, inheriting Stark Industries upon his parents' untimely death. Tony designed many weapons of war for Stark Industries and far beyond what any other company was creating at the time, while living a flamboyant lifestyle, or a bon vivant lifestyle. Flamboyant also. While Tony was consulting overseas on a weapons contract, his team was ambushed and he was kidnapped by the warlord Wang Chu. And that was changed later due to insensitive, we do not, yeah, it was just insensitive at the time in 1962. Tony made a gruesome discovery when that explosion had set off shrapnel mere inches from his heart. Oh, and the only untimely invention of a fellow captor and engineer, Jensen, kept the shrapnel at bay. So while held captive and forced to work on weapons, Tony turned his near-death experience into inspiration. And with the help of Jensen, they built a suit of armor to protect Tony and also help him escape. Now, it does not look anything like this armor that is on the current Captain America. His first armor was very rudimentary. It's just a helmet and a metal, like a, I don't even think the arms fit. Did the arms fit? It was like a metal suit. Yeah, it was just straight. Like he looked like he was flying like a bullet. But once Tony escaped, he would go on to be one of the founding members of the Avengers. Tony and Thor were teammates, both were founding members, when Loki tried to cause havoc in New York by controlling Hulk. Thor arrived from Asgard to let Tony, Ant-Man, and Wasp know that his brother Loki was really tricking Hulk into destroying New York. They defeated Loki and formed the Avengers together to fight Earth's bigger battles. And that is Tony Stark, Iron Man.
Next up, we have a god of another pantheon, and this is Hercules of the Greek pantheon.
Yeah, the Zeus, the Olympians.
Yes. Now, Hercules is a character almost as old as Thor for the comics wise.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that he has both a golden age and a silver age counterpart. Mm-hmm. His first appearance, Golden Age, was Young Allies number 16, May 1945. His first Silver Age appearance will be the Journey into Mystery Annual number 1, June 1965. Hercules was the son of Zeus, king of the Olympian gods, and Alcmena of Thebes in ancient Greece. He was born as a result of Zeus seducing Alcmena in the guise of an Amphitryon. Hercules was born with the potential for superhuman strength. Zeus' wife grew jealous of basically his adultery, and Alcmena tried to appease the goddess by naming her son Hercules, which means like the wheel of Hera.
Again, Hera. There's a lot of issues here, but she always went by after the women.
Oh yeah.
I'm just saying, if she would have, not that she could do anything to her.
And
Zeus.
But Zeus was out here wrong too. Now he fooled around
he tricked most of them.
In order to birth Hercules, while this lady's husband was off at war, he snuck into her chambers as her husband. So she just thought her husband was
sounds like a classic biblical story, David and Bathsheba.
Right. So fast forward to 1940. Hercules covertly fights in World War II, and he was instrumental in the formation of the Greek resistance. He was on a covert mission to Paris, France, when Baron Strucker attacked it in a robot suit. To get around the Olympian rule not to get involved in mortal wars, he donned a pair of green Speedos and pretended to be the submariner.
That is a one interesting looking submariner.
Right. Wolverine was also in Paris at the time, working on a mission to kill a Nazi agent and witnessed the attack. Hercules formally met Wolverine in the 50s at the sign of the Lion Heart. The two clashed over a red-headed girl, but Wolverine secretly took her home. Herc returned the next night to seduce the girl. Following this encounter, these two immortal warriors became lifelong drinking buddies. Later, the Olympian god Ares hoped to incite war among Olympus, Asgard, and eventually Earth. Ares turned all the Olympian gods to crystal, and as Hercules was unaffected by being only half god, Ares' agents beat him severely and abandoned him on Earth. Hercules remained amnesiac for many weeks until Hawkeye discovered him and returned him to the Avengers. The Avengers' aid uncovered the plot, and Ares was stopped. Hercules and his teammate, the Asgardian thunder god Thor, sealed the access to both worlds. Hercules continued to occasionally interact with Earth. He helped found the short-lived West Coast super team called the Champions of Los Angeles, after they had helped him and Venus thwart a plot by Pluto to force him into marriage with Hippolyta and invade Olympus. While on this team, Hercules began a relationship with his team leader, the Black Widow. It did not last long, but the two remained on good terms afterwards. He also kept in touch with the Avengers, assisting them in reserve capacity against menaces such as Corvette. Eventually, Hercules rejoined the Avengers on a full-time basis. That's Hercules.
All right. Next on our list is Beta Ray Bill. What type of animal is that?
No.
He's Beta Ray.
He's a humanoid.
Okay. All right. The Burning Galaxy was just, okay, his first appearance was in Thor number 337, 1983. So we're going into the 80s. And by this time, somebody new was writing for Thor. And he's getting out of that classic age of Thor. The Burning Galaxy was destroyed through the machinations of Sultur and his fire demons. Surviving Corbinites decided to choose a champion, which they would follow to their new home. That champion is known as Beta Ray Bill. He was successfully when she transformed into a cybernetic being resembling a fierce creature. So he's AI?
He's an alien. Well, no, he's an alien with cybernetic like enhancements because to make him stronger and everything. If you see a picture of him, no, not like the Terminator. If you see a picture of him, he doesn't have the muzzle. His original facial picture is not a muzzle. Like here, he looks kind of horse-like or camel-like or whatever. But that came after the enhancements because his face was kind of flat. He's still that orange color.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But the Corbinites then massed their fleet and put themselves into the stasis and followed Bill's ship, Scuttlebutt. Oh, they had fun in the 80s, didn't they? Bill fought legions of demons, and I think every teenage boy was just, yes, in the 80s. During this exodus, Sultur's fire demons Surtur.
Yeah.
Okay, Surtur's fire demons managed to breach and completely overrun Scuttlebutt. Unable to fight them all off, Bill resorted into opening an airlock in a desperate move to force all of them out of the ship to protect the Corbinites. This almost cost Bill their life, though, but he was saved by a passing Nova Centaurian at the last second. As the fleet approached the Milky Way galaxy, it was detected by S.H.I.E.L.D. Satellite Nick Fury asked Thor to investigate. Thor was deemed a threat by Scuttlebutt, so Bill fought him. During the short battle, Thor was separated from his hammer, Mjolnir, and the hammer was when he reverted back to Don Blake by this point. Okay, Bill knocked him out. Curious, Bill picked up the hammer and gained the power of Thor. Scuttlebutt landed on Earth, but Odin transported Thor and Bill to Asgard to resolve the problem. Give him back his hammer. Okay. Bill claimed that the hammer was spoils of battle. Odin decreed that the two would battle to the death in Skargan for the right to keep the hammer. Bill's covenant physiology gave him an advantage in the lava-filled realm, and so he won again. It was later revealed that Odin gave Bill the gift on purpose to defeat the weakened Thor. However, he refused to take Thor's life. Odin may have chosen that arena to test Bill's worthiness further to teach Thor a lesson. Regardless, he returned the hammer to Thor, and the new hammer made of Stormbreaker, and forged it for Bill. So that's how he got Stormbreaker. I'm sorry. Again, Odin with his meddling and tricks.
All right, so one thing I want to say is this Beta Ray Bill, this is one character that I have been waiting
to see in the movies.
Thor stories.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
You think he will? Because
I think somehow or another they're going to introduce him because he is to the Thor storyline of like the 90s. He's just as important as Jane Foster.
Yeah.
Because
he sounds like it.
well, think about it. Captain America was the first mortal that picked up the hammer. Yes. Right? Okay. This is the first alien that picked up the hammer and was made working. And didn't even realize that he wasn't supposed to be able to pick it up.
And he felt like he should keep it because it was supposed to.
Right. So
there we go.
That's one of our favorite Thor characters. Now we jump into the enemies. The first enemy is a well-known one. Loki Laufeyson. First appearance, Venus number 6, May 1949. That's his Golden Age appearance. And his Silver Age appearance would be Journey into Mystery number 85, August 1962. Loki Laufeyson is the trickster god of mischief, evil, and lies, and a member of the monstrous frost giants of Jotunheim. He was adopted and raised among the Asgardians, a group of humanoid beings from the pocket dimension of Asgard, the realm eternal. He was born smaller than the rest of his race and rejected by his father Loki, but he was adopted by the All-Father Odin following the war. He was taken back to Asgard to be raised alongside his adopted brother Thor. He was worshipped by the humans known as Vikings and became a part of Norse mythology. Loki became resentful over time of how differently the general Asgardian citizenry treated him and Thor throughout their childhood and adolescence. The Asgardians clearly favored Thor, valuing great strength, tenacity, and battle bravery above all. Loki's gifts, however, lay in other areas, most notably sorcery. Possessing a natural affinity for commanding great magical forces, he schemed to use his power to destroy Thor and become the most powerful in all of Asgard. And this is Loki Laufeyson. Don't have to get into too much of it, but he might have had his own.
He had his own graphic novel club. And if you would like to check that out, you can go back to in our YouTube page. Go back to last June 2021. We did a whole episode on Loki. Okay. Oh, Laufeyson. Okay. Next on our list is Amora the Enchantress. Her first appearance was in Journey into the Mysteries, number 1 and 3, in February 1964. Amora was born somewhere in Asgard. Her parentage is unknown. While still an adolescent, she ran away to the land of the Norns and apprenticed herself to Carmela, who was the most powerful sorceress in all of the Asgard dimensions. She studied all of the basic arts of Asgardian magic until Carmela expelled her for being too undisciplined. She picked up other mystical skills from seducing other Asgardian magi and wizards. In her first encounter with Thor, after he gained his human identity of Don Blake, the Enchantress attempted unsuccessfully to seduce Blake and then ordered the executioner to depose of Jane Foster, the mortal woman who Thor then loved. Thor saved Foster and defeated both the Enchantress and Executioner. In the following years, Enchantress also allied herself with Loki and Baron Zemo and the Mandarin and Archon in pursuit of her goals and powers of vengeance upon her enemies. During her stint with the Mandarin, Mora and Scrooge Scourge. Attempted to conquer Asia with an army of rock trolls. Although creating a giant to destroy her enemies, Amor and Scourge were defeated by Hercules and the Scarlet Witch. The enchantress' crimes earned Odin's wrath, and she suffered exile from Asgard in the past. However, she and the executioner both came to Asgard's aid in recent wars with Surtur and his legion from Muspelheim. I know. Muscle fly.
They used vowels.
Yeah.
It threw you.
It threw me. The enchantress and the executioner joined the heroes of Asgard to earn the right to stay in Asgard once again. Amor also became involved with the Guardian of Asgard, Rainbow Bridge. Oh, yeah, the Guardian, Heimdall. Yeah, I guess they dated. Finally, tiring of the enchantress' contemptuous treatment of him, the executioner nobly sacrificed his life on a mission with Thor into hell and the realm goddess Hela. Despite the fact that Amor had always led the executioner on, she genuinely did grieve for him. So Amor was shown to be quite vengeful, and she often throws a parting shot at her enemies when they're fleeing, or is more willing to stab an whole enemy in the back in the name of revenge. She once cursed an entire planet in retaliation for her necklace being destroyed. And that is Amor the Enchantress.
They didn't really bring her to the MCU like that,
No.
but she did because she was a character on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. one time where she was stuck on Midgard. Not really, she knew who she was, but just using her power to just googly-eyed men and make them do what she wants. That was her whole story arc. Yeah. Right. All right, so next up we have a major baddie from the world of Thor and the Nine Realms. We have Malekith the Accursed. His first appearance was Thor number 344, February 1984. Malekith the Accursed is also the main antagonist in Thor the Dark World. Okay, they look different, so they did not.
I guess the long golden white hair there.
Well, it would have played considering that he's supposed to be an elf.
Yeah, it would have played, but
the most important feature that they left off is not the hair, it's just the fact that his face is two-tone black and white. There's a reason for that, and they left that. So let's get into Malekith. He's a dark elf from Svartalfheim. Y'all got it?
Nope.
Svartalfheim. He was born the 13th son to a 13th son and to Lady Mazaro of the Black Bile clan, known as the Wild Hunt's Lords for their use of war dogs. Eventually, his father, brothers, and uncles all died in the many wars the Dark Elves fought, led by Krall the Uncontrollable. His mother assured him he wouldn't have to die a soldier. However, during the 43rd Troll War, his mother sold him to the Undertaker elves of the southern swamps so that she could get food for the war dogs. As he was taken away, his mother told him she couldn't lose another son without gaining anything, and that at least he wouldn't have to be a soldier. He was forced to work as a corpse burner in the war, burning the corpses of 3,000 fallen Dark Elves, some still alive, after each battle while leaving the enemy corpses to rot. Years later, he was broken out of hell by a group of Dark Elves loyal to him and returned to Svartalfheim with only one of them, Scumtone. Surviving, however, after seeing that his people had grown weak and won't accept him as their ruler, he and his followers began hunting the other Dark Elves to make them strong again. Knowing Thor would interfere with his plans, Malekith had one of his followers slip parasites into Thor's meat to spy on him, and began his massacre in a village in Svartalfheim. They murdered all Dark Elves except for the woman Wazira. Thor and the Warriors 3 arrived in the village, and Malekith told them his intentions of killing all dark elves who won't follow him, and cut Waziria's arm before leaving. During the War of the Realms, when confronted by the Avengers, Malekith captured the Venom symbiote and used dark magic to bend it to his will. Upon realizing that the Black Bifrost had been seized, which is another form of transportation that the Dark Elves had created, Malekith teleported to Svartalfheim and incapacitated Freya and Odin, wielding the symbiote in the form of a sword in emulation of the dark god Noah. Taking his captives to Stonehenge, Malekith issued a challenge to Thor, intent on killing him even as his allies were defeated and his forces routed. Now, when four Thors, Thor Odin's son, his younger self from the 6th century, his older self from Earth 14412, and Jane Foster arrived to battle him, Malekith bonded to the symbiote and used it to augment his dark elf acolytes, declaring himself the Butcher of Thors. Realizing that if the youngest Thor was killed, then the present and future Thors would be erased from existence, Malekith tried to kill him, but wound up in combat with the present-day Thor instead, taking the last hammer of Asgard and augmenting it with the living abyss to turn it into the black hammer of the accursed. Thor summoned the reforged Mjolnir and separated Malekith from the symbiote, while young Thor lopped off one of his arms. Unable to accept his defeat, Malekith attempted to sick his wild hunt and bob tiger on the Thors, but his control over them was broken by his fear, and the beast instead dismembered and devoured their former master. And that was Malekith the Accursed.
I tell you, wow.
Yes.
That's something else. My favorite. Well, my favorite in the MCU. This is Hela. Her first appearance was in Journey into the Mystery, number 102 in January 1964. Hela is the daughter of Loki and the sorceress giantess Angerboda. The Norns, the goddesses of fate, warned the Asgardian gods that Hela would prove to be a great danger to them. So Odin gave her the task of becoming the goddess and ruler of the spirits of the dead on the day of her maturity. These spirits were in other dimension realms of Hel and Nephilim, and 2 more of the 9 worlds, both of which Hela ruled. However, Odin himself directly ruled the souls of Asgardians and their human worshippers who died in battle as heroes, and had a palace in Valhalla, built in the distant section of the Asgard to house them. Hela sought to bring more Asgardian souls under her control, and especially longed to possess the souls of Odin and his sons. Thor, however, during their first meeting, when Thor offered his own life in exchange for that of Lady Siff, who was a prisoner of Hela, the goddess was so impressed by the young thunder gods of nobility, she let both of them go. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, they changed it in the MCU to be the daughter of Odin's son.
Yeah, so she's the sister
Of Thor, and in MCU, sister instead of the daughter of Loki. But she is she has quite a long back and forth with Odin, not with Thor.
Now, we've talked about her before, so
Oh, yeah.
we're gonna jump
Yes,
in.
we have.
Yes, we have. So we're gonna jump into actually
The other son of
the
Loki.
other son of Loki,
Mhm.
Jormungand, known as the Midgard Circle. First appearance, Thor number 127, February 1966. Jormungand, well, it's not Jormungand. Is it Jormungand or Jormungand?
Oh,
I think it's Jormungand.
no, not that.
Okay, Jormungand was, according to Norse legend, the son of the Asgardian prince Loki and of the sorceress Angerboda. Both Loki and Angerboda were descended from the frost giants of Jotunheim and were of humanoid appearance. However, the sons Angerboda bore Loki, Jormungand and the Fenris wolf were not. It has been suggested that Jormungand and the Fenris wolf were born as sentient animals because their parents each had the magical ability to change his or her own shape.
Hence, Jormungand and the Fenris wolf each bear the form of the animal that their parents had assumed at the moment that they were conceived. Presumably, Jormungand was the size of a human infant when he was born. Realizing that Jormungand was potentially a danger to the gods of Asgard, Odin, the monarch of the other dimensional realm of Asgard, banished Jormungand to the depths of the oceans of Earth, the world that the Asgardians call Midgard. At his full size, Jormungand was enormous enough to encircle the entire planet. Hence, he became known as the Midgard Circle. It was prophesied that on the day of Ragnarok, when it is said that most of the gods of Asgard will perish, that Odin's son Thor, god of thunder, would kill the Midgard serpent. But then the prophecy continued. Thor himself would also die as a result of the Midgard serpent's venom. More recently, in vengeance for humiliating defeat by Thor, Hela cast a spell on him, making him incapable of dying, but also incapable of healing from injuries. As protection, Thor created a suit of virtually indestructible armor for himself. Seeing their chance for their own vengeance on Thor, a band of frost giants went to Earth and attempted to find the Midgard serpent. Jormungand appeared to them in the form of the gigantic ancient Chinese dragon Fin Fang Foom. Learning of the curse that Hela put on Thor, the disguised Jormungand was pleased to comply with the giant's request that he attack Thor. Though Jormungand could not now kill Thor, he intended to wreak such damage on the thunder god's body as to render him forever helpless, thereby thwarting the prophecy that Thor would someday kill him. As Fin Fang Foom, Jormungand arrived in New York and encountered Thor, but did not recognize him due to the thunder god's new armor and beard. Thor did not realize that in Fin Fang Foom was Jormungand either. After arriving in a deserted area to do battle, Jormungand and Thor revealed their true identities to each other. A tremendous battle ensued, which ended when Thor used his full strength and the entire power of the enchanted hammer Mjolnir to deliver the death blow to Jormungand. The Midgard serpent vanished from sight on Earth upon dying, presumably returning to ethereal form. The extraordinary energies generated by Mjolnir, combined with the impact of the death blow to Jormungand, reduced Thor's body to a gelatin-like mass of flesh. Yet, due to Hela's curse, Thor still lived. His spirit took over the form of the destroyer armor, and he then forced Hela to resurrect him in his true body, fully restored to health and free of her curse. By slaying the Midgard serpent, Thor has escaped his own prophesied fate of being killed by Jormungand. Ragnarok, if it ever came, would therefore take place in a somewhat different manner from the way it has been foretold. And that's the Midgard serpent.
All right.
Let me read it last.
Okay. All right. And
all right.
William is excited about this.
Hey, now I'm gonna tell you why I'm excited, because this storyline started when Spider-Man got his black costume.
Oh.
This is when we were first introduced to the symbiotes.
Okay.
But now in 2000, in the 2000s, I want to say the late 2000s, we find that not only is the symbiote just a part of the alien species, but he is also, they have a god of their own. And he's a dark god called Noah. All right, and he's going to be brought up in this as well. Now, that's one of the last storylines that they had in Marvel across the whole books.
Mm-hmm.
That Noah basically attacked Earth 616, and it took everything, but everyone to defeat him.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. Well,
All right.
jump on
So here we go. Gore the God Butcher, first appearance, Thor God of Thunder, #2, November 2012. Gore the God Butcher was born on a planet with no name and almost every day on the brink of starvation. He was taught to trust in the gods, but they never answered his prayers. So at an early age, when his mother and father died, they left him to fend for himself in the most harsh environment. Years later, he married and fathered some children. However, most of them died. Gore's pregnant mate Ara was killed during an earthquake,
and one by one his children perished until he was left with one son, Agar. When Agar was on the brink of death due to starvation, Gore sought to ease his suffering and told his son they would soon reach a forest where they would never go hungry again. So, of course, stricken with grief after Agar's death, Gore gave up hope and outwardly expressed his belief that there were no gods, for which he was exiled by his superstitious people. So while wandering the desert praying to die, Gore just happened to witness a pair of battling gods, a dark elder god called Null and a gold-armored, purple-skinned god. They both plunged out of the sky and crash-landed nearby. Shocked by the realization that gods did exist, Gore was enraged when the gold-armored god begged for help. The dark god's sword transforming into an amorphous mass of living darkness and bonding to him. Gore used his new weapon, the all-black necro sword, to kill the gold-armored god, then vowed to seek vengeance against all gods for never answering his prayers and set out to kill them all. Now, Gore despised any god and traveled the cosmos for thousands of years to exact his revenge, embarking on basically a homicidal crusade in which he allegedly killed many gods of fear, war, chaos, genocide, revenge, plagues, earthquakes, blood, wrath, jealousy, death, degradation, and even a few gods of poetry and flowers. At some point in the 9th century, Gore arrives on Earth and kills a god from the Americas, the body washing up on the shores of Iceland, where it was found by Thor. At a later date, while accompanying a Viking raiding party to Russia, Thor found some of the Slavic gods dead. Here, Thor was attacked by Gore, who nearly managed to kill Thor. But just before the killing blow, Thor conjured a lightning strike, which knocked both of them out. Gore survived, however, this encounter and would spend the next 1,000 years butchering more and more gods, growing ever stronger and amassing an army of dark minions to assist him in his crusade. Even after death, Gore had managed to leave his mark on the Thor of Earth 616, as Gore's philosophy was responsible for Thor becoming unworthy and being unable to live beyond. Gore's consciousness was contained inside the sword all black, finally at peace in an empty void without gods. Eons after his death, Gore was resurrected by King Loki, all black's then host, in order to kill him after he killed All-Father Thor, manifesting a copy of his body from the symbiote. Instead, Gore interrupted their duel by reclaiming All Black and impaling King Loki through the back with it. Crucifying Thor and Loki, Gore mocked them both, but was blasted into orbit by the power of the All-Father. Recalling the scattered pieces and offshoots of All Black, Gore engaged All-Father Thor in a battle that devastated solar systems, vowing to make Thor watch as he slaughtered the inhabitants of Midgard and all of the remaining life in the cosmos before creating his own, and ensuring they were devoid of the need for worship. Attacked by Loki, Gore mutilated him before engulfing both brothers in All Black, declaring he had transcended mortality and became not a mere god, but a force of nature. It's here that Gore tried to devour Thor by manifesting a black hole, but was distracted by King Loki telling him the story of every heroic deed Thor had ever performed, buying time for Thor to unleash the full might of the god tempest from within Mjolnir, destroying the all-black symbiote. Restored to life as a mortal, but left amnesiac and insane, Gore was taken in by the Sky Lords of Midgard to live out the remainder of his days in peace. Now, that's Gore the God Butcher. And I'm hoping that when it comes to the movie, that they make him the most awesome, ruthless enemy that Thor has ever seen, because of the comics outside of Null, the symbiote god. Yeah, this guy here is it.
All right, start. And we're gonna just fly through these due to time, because we're already over our hour. These are quick though. Let's go through these teams. We have the Pantheon of the Asgardian gods. The Asgardians are a humanoid race of extra-dimensional beings that hail from Asgard. the small pocket dimension adjacent to Earth. They traveled the 9 realms, including Earth, via the interdimensional nexus known as the Bifrost. They are also known as the Asgardians, who have been worshipped by humans of Scandinavia, Britain, and Northern Europe. The religion, however, fell out of favor due to the rise of Christianity.
Watch Vikings.
Vikings. All right.
All right, so this next team will be the Avengers. These are the heroes that came together in Avengers #1, July 1963. In the beginning, they came together to fight the Hulk, who they thought was the problem. And it came to be that the Hulk was being controlled by Loki in order to draw Thor into battle. After Thor lets the other heroes in on Loki's scheme, they band together to defeat Loki. And seeing how well they work together, the 5 heroes decide to band together and call themselves the Avengers at Walt's suggestion. Now, they retconned the storyline to say that it was Loki bringing the Chitauri to Earth for the MCU.
Yes.
Now, remember, Hulk did still go on his rampage, but he was a part of the Avengers.
Yes.
So,
A little bit of change.
yeah.
Right, and then we have the Ultimates. This is Avengers Volume 6, number 0, October 2015. They're the latest team. Yes.
Well, what I want to say is the Ultimates, the only reason why we're doing the Ultimates because they're from Earth 1610. But 1610 was the last Earth with 616, right before the multiverse was destroyed. Okay. So they're going to play a big role. They play a big role over Earths.
Okay. The Ultimates originated from Captain Marvel's proposal of a proactive task force with the purpose of looking into potential threats and solving them before they become a problem to Earth, applying this nonviolent solution whenever possible. However, after consulting the project with Black Panther, Captain Marvel was directed to another potential member, Blue Marvel, a hero experienced in the cosmic level threats, who then turned the recommended the addition of Spectrum, a powerhouse with high-level superhero strategy. Where have we met Spectrum before?
So, yeah, that's Captain Marvel's pie.
Yes, in WandaVision.
Rambo.
Monica Rambo. The final proposed member was Miss America, who we talked about a couple of weeks ago as a member of the A-Team. And she is also going to be introduced in Multiverse that comes out in less than a month. So suggested by Spectrum due to her knowledge of the cosmic territory. And that is one of her powers. One of the Ultimates' first missions involved the Great Galactus Hunger. Oh, gosh, I remember him. To solve this problem, they confronted Galactus by trapping him inside of his old incubator and used the similar process that was used to create him, but using a neutronium, yes, to accelerate it. After a flash of light, the incubator's destruction, Galactus emerged anew with a new purpose in life. He became the life bringer instead of the life taker. And the first planet that Galactus restored was Archipelago, which had been the very first victim of his hunger. Soon after returning home, the Ultimates became involved in the second superhero civil war, provoked by the appearance of an inhuman named Ulysses King. With the ability to profile the future, Miss America adamantly opposed Captain Marvel's initiative to actively use Ulysses to proactively fight crime, while the rest of the Ultimates supported her to a certain degree. The differences of opinion led to a physical conflict between the Ultimates. During the brawl, the Anti-Man escaped custody and fled. Black Panther eventually also publicly disavowed Captain Marvel's actions and joined Iron Man's faction that opposed the predicted justice. Oh, this kind of reminds me of that Minority Report. The team was then terminated as a consequence of these altercations, which were reported to Philip Nelson Bolt, who was the leader of the troubleshooters and a federal agent who was tasked to covertly monitor the Ultimates' activities. And that's the Ultimates. I kind of want to read that now.
You know, this is where we get the Negro, what's his name?
Nick Fury?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Well, in the Ultimates, this is where the sun
Son of Nick.
kind of morphed, like they
It
changed
became
the
Nick.
storyline where the sun actually becomes,
Fury.
yeah.
Okay.
So, all right, so.
Yep.
Yeah, so, okay, this League of Realms. This League of Realms' first appearance was Thor God of Thunder, number 14, October 2013. The League of Realms was a team uniting warriors of the 9 realms in order to hunt down Malekith the Accursed while he was slaughtering his own people across the 9 realms. The team was assembled as Thor desired to lead an army of Asgardians, but such action was considered an illegal incursion on the realms. The team consisted of Screwbeard of Nadavier, Ud the Troll, and Agi of Jotunheim. Lady Waziria of Svartalfheim, a victim of Malekith's rampage, also joined the League despite disapproval from almost every member. The League was first sent to Nadavier to protect the Dark Elves' queen in exile, Alflice. Yes, Alflice, we'll call her Alflice.
Sounds
But
good.
their inability to work together probably led to their inability to defend her. In order to prevent his league from falling apart in front of him, Thor had the group headed to the nearest tavern, where Thor and Og engaged in a drinking contest while the others wagered on the winner, narrowly drinking the giant under the table. The next day, the league headed to Jotunheim, where Malekith was hunting down a group of elves who hid among the mountain giants. Agi was directly targeted by the accursed, who leapt into his mouth and brutally slashed apart the giant's brains with his blades, felling them. Having gone to the frost giants for help, Malekith was out of reach of the League of Realms. Enraged, the others had to hold Thor back to prevent an incursion inside the frost giants' territory and a larger conflict. After burying Agi, the League went to Vanaheim and found more elves dead, slain fighting amongst themselves. Thor realized that there was to be a traitor in their midst. So Thor cast a spell and, accusing Ud of being the traitor, seemingly executed him against Honeyshot and the League's advice. Ud, however, was transported elsewhere in Vanaheim with a note addressed to the League pinned to his backside and leading them to the Midgard location of the Dark Elves' refuge. That rash action caused the League to split, with only Lady Waziria as a companion to Thor. While the two of them headed to Midgard to find the Council of the Unhallowed, the Dark Elf ruling council in hiding, and urged them to unite against Malekith. The rest of the League found Ud as confused as them, which means Thor just played a joke on him. He didn't really kill him. He just wanted to sow a little misdirection. Now, Thor later placed Spider-Man in charge of the League of Realms, despite his protest that he wasn't cut out for the job, and also sent them to Africa to recruit the commander of the Angels, Fernanda, who was opposed to the senseless bloodshed of the War of the Realms. Spider-Man's witty banter and aversion to killing annoyed and outraged the other members of the team, with Screwbeard almost killing him when he tried to stop them from slaughtering the Angels. However, Spider-Man was able to sway Fernanda into calling an end to the battle and joining the team using empathy and diplomacy. Following Malekith's defeat and the end of the War of the Realms, Baldur actually joined the League of Realms at this time.
That is the League of Realms, and that is actually it for us today. You can take a look at our works cited if you want to take a deeper dive into some of these groups, members, people, characters, because there's a whole lot more to each of their stories that we cannot cover due to time. And we have taken up much of your time already. And we just want you to know that we still borrow thousands of digital comics and graphic novels and mangas from Clayton County Library System with Comics Plus. No holds, no waiting. Plus, you can get offline access from your tablet, computer, or smartphone. So just sign up today with your library card at claytonpl.org under Learning and Research and click on Comics Plus. And in 2 weeks' time, as we discussed earlier, we will be discussing DC's New Gods on April 26th at 4 o'clock, same bad time, same bad place. And we want to thank you again for joining us. And again, if there's something that you want to see us cover this year, please email us at that address there at cclsfpstaff@gmail.com, and you can reach out to us in that way. But we'll see you guys later.
Holla.